Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen Alia, and it is, on behalf of Zack and Pat, it's our honor to present at WGICon this year. We are incredibly honored to have the opportunity to bring you guys information, and hopefully we help all of you in some way today. So my name is Stephen Alia, and I'm a member of the WIN Steering Committee. I am the Executive Director of Horizon Performing Pageantry Arts Association, which is the parent nonprofit of Horizon Wins. And in addition, I'm also the designer for LSM Wins. So I have this somewhat interesting sort of like knowledge of all of the independent classes in those ways. So it's a great opportunity for me to be able to share with you today what the little bit that I do know. Hopefully we all gain a little bit of knowledge from that. This is Pat Miller.
My name is Pat Miller. I'm the director of Horizon Wins, created in 2017, and I've been a band director for most of the last 25 years. Just recently have stepped away from that, and I'm just designing full-time and get to work with Steve. We've been working together, even though his position has changed within the organization a few times. We've been working on it since day one together, and recently just got to know Zack, which has been a fun experience. So.
And I'm Zack. I'm the Executive Director of LSM Performing Arts. I oversee LSM Wins. I'm also the Associate Director of Bands at Southgate Anderson High School. We're just south of Detroit. And I also serve on the WGI Wins Steering Committee. And we're just really thankful and grateful to be here and share our experiences with you and hopefully see some more Wins groups coming up.
So today, when we started to formulate this conversation that we're going to have, we looked at the like how do you organize a conversation about how to create a successful Wins group? So we talked about three major headings that we're going to talk about today, which is what is success, how do you create success in the infancy of a program, and then how do you sustain that success over the long haul? So the first part of the conversation that we're going to have today is what is success. So obviously the dictionary says it's the accomplishment of an aim or purpose. Obviously in this activity we have a specific aim, which is hopefully to help students or performers reach their potential through our activities. So we're fortunate to have two highly successful Wins groups. So a lot of time during the conversation today, I'm going to sort of play MC. I'll add in as we need to, but I'll direct to both of these guys to talk about their individual groups and give hopefully what become some best practices for you as you guys enter the activity or grow your groups or whatever it may be. So Zack, tell me, when you first brought LSM to the WGI Wins activity, tell me what your goals were when you first started.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because I know Wayne kind of threw us a little under the bus yesterday in his presentation, but I actually did not bring LSM Wins to WGI. We had a director before me who did, and who basically had left and resigned in the middle of the season, and I was a performing member. At the time, my now wife and I kind of decided, like, hey, what are we going to do now that he's gone? The Dayton Regional didn't work out, so it wasn't so hot. We also found out that we didn't have drill really like working in the background for us. No one was writing for it for us like we thought. We basically said, what do we do? So we went to the kids and we basically said, like, listen, we can absolutely like throw in the towel, or we can just kind of figure something out as we go, and we're kind of going to rebuild next year. So we kind of started already in the hole, having no idea what we were doing, and completely on fire. And that fire like was cranked up to 1,000 when the kids said, we want to keep doing this, we want to do this, and we got a hold of our bank account, and we were so incredibly in the red. So our goal was to survive, and I think that is a fair goal for many groups that are coming out and doing this for the first time. Eventually, over time, we assembled a board of directors. We regained our 501c3 status, and kind of defined a mission. We actually updated our mission statement last year for our organization. It's that LSM Performing Arts, we provide training and performing opportunities in order to develop individuals who embody perseverance, integrity, and innovative thinking. And I think it's really important that as you start to develop your own group, you decide what is your goal, what is your mission, and how are you going to achieve success. It's not necessarily a competitive thing. Even though this is a competitive activity, I think a lot of us think member experience really is a whole lot of it, and that's kind of how we developed our mission statement. Pat, you guys recently did the same thing with Horizon, I think.
Yeah, we had a different situation. That we were very beginning, brand new, and when WGI announced they were going to do a WINS thing, at that time I was like, that's really cool. Let's try to make this happen. But I was a band director at a private school that didn't have a marching band, so my resources to my school were a little bit different. So I reached out to directors in the area, and after several conversations, eventually Ryan Gant, who was at one of the high schools in town, got back to me a few months later. He's like, hey, you want to do this WINS thing still? I'm like, yeah, let's make it happen. So we kind of were just like, how do we do this with very little reference of any kind on how to make it work? And so we talked to people and watched videos. I remember watching when Amachi and North Carolina, those groups came out in the very beginning and kind of showed us what was possible. And then I watched a lot of videos. Like we didn't have, like when you talked about mission statement, that was something we didn't have in play until about a month ago. Because we're still doing our board and really creating that part of our structure right now. But I had some great people with me that just wanted to do whatever this indoor WINS thing was, and we knew we were good at what we did. We had cool ideas, and so we just put together a show. We talked to enough kids, and we got enough kids to do it, and we just kind of went for it. We weren't thinking, like Zach said, we weren't thinking about success and competition. We were just like, let's just see if we can get a show on the floor. Let's just try to make something happen. And that was our approach. Like we had hardly any resources. We eventually got hooked up with the Horizon people, which was great, and they'd had their color guard. So we got under their umbrella, and that gave us some structure administratively that helped us. But even they were like, let's just try to make it happen. And for us, it was all about, how can we create a really cool experience for the kids, the performers who are going to come out and give their time every weekend for 4 months. Let's just kind of see how it goes. And that was really the basis for it. Let's just do something really kind of cool and unique. And where we are in Florida, indoor is a bit of an odd thing. Like Tampa and St. Pete have a lot of indoor stuff going on. You get south of that between us and Fort Myers, and there's not a lot there. And any indoor group that involves that part of the state probably involves one of the two of us and a few other people. It's just, this is an area, so to start an indoor WINS group, a lot of schools even have any indoor program, not to mention a WINS group. Like that's just a foreign concept. So we kind of just jumped in and we're like, we knew we had faith in our abilities to put something on the floor that was kind of cool if the kids were to show up and do it. And we did. We just kind of jumped in, and the kids had a great time. We had a great time. We quite honestly didn't really have any idea of what we were doing other than let's just try to make this happen in a gym and see how it goes. And we lucked out. We had great kids, had great people teaching with me that hopped in on the board, and we were able to make it happen.
So interestingly, like these organizations come from completely different places, and this isn't necessarily right on this slide per se, but LSM started 26 years ago as.
I was originally an indoor drumline.
Yeah.
Around the time WGI started that, they competed in a local circuit. Evolved, eventually became a DCA corps. Lake Shoreman went kind of defunct in 2009, and just was more or less a parade corps until WGI WINS started.
Well, and the Horizon Pageantry Arts Association was created to field a color guard back in 2014. 2014. So that color guard went inactive, but the organization stayed as an active business. And then we got hooked up with Pat and ended up becoming, the Horizon WINS, and the way that all kind of worked out. Now Horizon WINS is the only group that the Arts Association, they're the only ones that we serve at this point. So interestingly, I only became the executive director in May. Our founder, Steve Cabrera, who we just adore, he had some health issues and decided to back away from the activity. And he and I founded Horizon Performing Arts Association. At that time it was Performing Arts Association, became Pageantry Arts Association back in 2014. So then I became when he backed away, he asked me to become the executive director. We realized that he had sort of run it as a family business and a really successful one, but had very little corporate governance and all that kind of stuff. So what we've been doing is we've been sort of backfilling all of that structure in the last 4 months. So we now have a corporate board, we now have working bylaws, we have, we were already a 503(c), whatever that IRS number is, right? And so we've created a mission statement as well. And so ours is Horizon's mission is to provide safe and nurturing opportunities for performers, designers, and educators to flourish in the pageantry arts. So you can see that they're similar. It's really just wordsmithing, but having a goal is a really important way to start. Okay, we got to kind of move along. So. All right, so then what is success? So at the end of the day, we all define our own success. What LSM success is how LSM defines success can be different than Horizon, is going to be different than any other group, whether it's scholastic or independent in the activity. So there are some things that we sort of look at in general that we think is important. The attempt to move forward and not become stagnant. The ability to obtain happiness. So joy, most of us are volunteers in this activity, or we get paid very little. If we don't find joy in it, it's going to be really hard to continue doing it, right? And then to do meaningful or fulfilling work. So we obviously believe it's all about the journey, not the destination. While competitive results are awesome, I mean, it's great to win, it's great to medal or whatever, that's never the goal. The goal should be, how do your performers feel? What do they get from what you're doing? Are they growing as people? Are they growing as performers? Whatever it may be. So there are three main points of emphasis in here. The first one's setting realistic and achievable goals. So Pat, why don't you talk a little bit about that idea?
Well, because our resources were light, we tried to be very smart about it. Our goals were established based on what we had, who we had, where we could rehearse, what kind of resources we had when it came to equipment. So we basically started very basic. Okay, we have this number of kids. Cool. What can we pull off musically with that number of kids? What can we pull off visually? Instruments, same way. We were able to borrow instruments. We still borrow instruments, in fact, from programs in our area. We don't have our own instruments. So we just had to be very basic about it and make sure that we weren't asking anything of ourselves or of the kids that was not realistic given where we were and who we had and our situation. It's how we did floors. We could not go out and buy a brand new floor. We didn't buy a brand new floor until our third year of existence. We bought used ones, or we had access to ones. So every goal that we had from how much can we rehearse on a weekend? Can we expect these kids to come in and be with us 16 hours a weekend? We couldn't back then. We do now. But back then it was much less, and every year we add more. We kind of up the ante every year on our rehearsal schedule. So we just looked at every component that was involved and said, okay, let's start here. And then as they achieve those goals, and as we as an organization achieve those goals, then we can start to go up another level. But it was being realistic. Like we came out at A class because that's where we're supposed to start. And our goal was not to be an open class or world class in 3 or 4 years. We were going to let our progress take us to where we were, which is how we've gotten to where we are in 6 years now. But it was just being very realistic and not looking at it as, hey, I want to come out in world now. We could have done that, and we probably would have been done after a year. That was not, our goal was to create, like we said earlier, our goal was to create a great experience for the kids. Had an amazing experience as a staff and as members. And if you do that, your goals will help set themselves down the road. Because you create the environment that makes them, they have a great time and they come back. And therefore, they help kind of build your goals and push them forward. And that was the approach we did. Very basic and tried to be very smart about it.
So the second part is the idea of starting small and planning for growth. And Pat just talked a little bit about that because it's kind of hard to necessarily extricate any of these as individual things. They kind of flow one into the other. But Zach, why don't you continue on that idea with what you did at LSM?
So our big thing with starting small is when I took over, we just were small. I was a part of the Lake Shoreman Drum and Bugle Corps in 2009, and after that year, everybody kind of it was an older DCA corps. A lot of people got married, had kids, membership kind of plummeted the next year, another director change, and then we were just trying to figure out for a couple of years, the organization was trying to figure out how do we produce this drum corps again, which obviously is an entire undertaking. WGI Wins presented an incredible opportunity for us, and we decided to participate. The problem was we hadn't done something for so many years that we only had a handful of kids. We had 8 students that were interested in really committing to what we were doing. Just to make the minimum number of members, my wife and I also performed. It was an incredible time, but I think it's really important kind of piggybacking off of what Pat said of just meeting the kids where they're at. being really realistic with what you have. And then we also had the benefit of looking at what didn't work the last several years and learning from those experiences. We weren't going to be a group that could just pull in 1 million people and have a world-class show. We were a group that had a handful of kids who just really enjoyed playing their instrument and maybe weren't the strongest at the time. So it was really meeting the kids where they're at. We continued in A class where we're starting to grow a bit, and just providing a great member experience for them is what's going to help you in terms of just membership growth in numbers and just quality of members and their performance.
Well, and all three of us have been, you know, we've been, this will tell you our age, we've been young and energetic before, right? You know, that whole like, I'm new to this and I have these humongous goals and I want to get it all done tomorrow, right? And to be honest with you, we believe in an independent situation. That's a really, really easy way to fizzle out. You know, you might have lots of energy right at the beginning. You might think that you have the financial resources to do this great thing, or you might think you're going to get 40 members the first year, or you might think that you might have this great show idea with all this intricate detail. To be honest with you, the first year, we all believe that you should just think small, achievable. How am I going to achieve? How am I going to get this thing started? Like, it's got to get on the road first, right? And then how do we move forward from there? So we all think that's really, really important. So success is a result of, the third part is that success is always a result of process. So we all know about like the idea of creating plan the whole time. Like we want to think the whole time of where do we want to be, and beginning with the end in mind, just Stephen Covey stuff right from the beginning. But also, we should be doing the same thing in every rehearsal. We should be doing the same thing at auditions. We should be doing the same thing over each month of our season or each month of our time. I mean, if you walk into a rehearsal without a good plan and you don't have process for how we're going to warm up musically, how we're going to warm up visually, then what you're doing is you're missing the opportunity for your performers to build those fundamental skills and therefore grow with the program. And lots of us are educators. We're in our own band programs or in our own other programs that we do. We think process a lot more, lesson plans and all of that kind of stuff, right? But lesson plans are just as important in an independent group. And so the idea of process and planning is super, super important. Okay, so the next part of the conversation is how to achieve success. So it's kind of like the baseline. When you first start your group, how are you going to make sure that the first year is successful? All right. So we have this also broken down into 3 parts. We have recruiting, we have member experience, and we have the idea of resource management. Okay. So the first 2 are a lot about personnel resources. How are you going to get people around you that are going to help you be successful with what you're doing? So recruiting is kind of one of those things where every group does it a little bit differently. We're fortunate to have 2 different viewpoints, so let's get both of those. So Zach, what do you guys do for recruiting at LSM?
Yeah, we do a lot of drives via social media. That helps a lot in terms of interest. We have like a live Google form that we keep up pretty regularly, just so we can maintain just a contact list of anyone who's interested in our organization. We also partner with our local marching band circuits and put up a recruiting booth. Anything like we'll bring anything shiny that we've collected over the years or anything like that. We'll maybe have kids over there with their telling their stories about their experiences with our organization. We usually leave like a QR code that brings us back to that interest form. So we, again, just continuing to collect a database of interested performers. We also go in and talk. I think the big thing for me and one of the most effective tools is just meaningful relationships with other bands, other area band programs. I'm really fortunate where I have my own scholastic high school band, and I have many colleagues that I can reach out to and I can say like, hey, can I come have a conversation with your band? Can I play our show for you? Just sit in during one of your class periods or marching band rehearsals and just tell your kids about our group and what we have going on. If you have these meaningful relationships and reach out to people in a very professional manner, it's very instrumental. That's the big thing for us. It also helps us in terms of other resources like rehearsal space, if we're ever in need of a last second instrument, things along those lines. Also, it's allowed us to like bring in other staff members with other programs and have a much bigger sense of camaraderie between our local schools. So it's been pretty great.
Well, and Zack has an advantage to a degree. He's involved with a competitive march band program that he's the director of. And to be honest with you, a good portion of the membership of LSM Wins comes from South Kate Anderson High School. So he kind of uses it, it's kind of interesting, he kind of uses it as an opportunity like most people would use a Scholastic Wins group, where you're literally taking that part to train kids in marching and moving and playing, so that in the fall, so the fall band also grows. So he kind of plays both cards in a way, like the Scholastic and independent philosophy cards. So what happens at Horizon Wins, Pat?
Some similar things. I'm not a band director anymore, but I do actively work with one of the programs in our area, which over the last 6 years has contributed easily to say 30 to 40% of Horizon has come from Braden River. It's been a pretty steady recruiter for that. But that's because that's where all the kids have been, and that's where I am at. And so to get the word out has been the easiest, most convenient way to do it. We have a great relationship with a number of the directors all in our area, and that has been a positive. Whether they're able to help us directly and not themselves is up to each individual person. But of those schools, not only do we get kids from those schools, but 2 of those schools help provide us with instruments. Another one of the schools has helped provide us electronics and things in the past until we were able to get our own stuff. Rehearsal space has been what the other schools, so even though all the directors in our area are super supportive of it, they may not always be able to be a part of it physically and come in and teach, and every once in a while we have those that can. But they're able to help us in many other ways behind the scenes, which has been huge. And as a result of that, then their kids become a part of it. And we get kids from probably just about every high school in our area. We get 1 or 2 from every high school, and the directors love it, and they're a great tool for that. They definitely don't mind us doing it. They realize that it's a positive for their program, like the things that were mentioned yesterday as far as the benefits we get out of this. We do an experience day weekend, or experience day, I guess, about 3 or 4 weeks before auditions, and it's just a chance for anybody to come and just see what it's like to spend 4 hours with the Wins group and kind of see how we live our day. Through that, we generally tend to get a good number of those kids come and audition. The first time we did it, we're about an hour south of Tampa, and about another hour and a half south of that is Fort Myers. And there's some big programs, big music programs down there. We had a girl come up from there from a really good music program, came up to our first experience day. We were all kind of shocked because nobody else at that point had come from anywhere south of where we were. So we all were like, wow, you come from this, cool. She came by herself to experience day. She brought 6 friends with her to the auditions. They were half our woodwind section that year. And ever since then, we've had 3 to 4 kids from that school every single year. And those kids drive about 80 miles each time to come up for rehearsals. And things like that happen in North Tampa as well. Once you get a person or 2 from a program, in my opinion, they're the best recruiters you can ever have, because if they're willing to bring their friends back with them, then the numbers just kind of take care of themselves in that respect. And that's been a big bonus for us, is you create that experience, and the kids that are there love it. They bring their friends, and the pipeline just keeps going.
Well, and that connects us into the second point, which is member experience. So really, as we go through the presentation for the rest of this time, a lot of the conversations can be about how do you create a member experience for your performers that, number one, makes them an asset to your program from a recruiting standpoint, for sure. There's no better advertising than word of mouth. And there's no, to be honest with you, there's a word of mouth from a 17-year-old is completely better than word of mouth from a 49-year-old. You know, I mean, it's just how that works, right? A 17-year-old kid going back to their school after their experience camp, or going back to their school after auditions, or at the end of the season going, oh my God, I had the most incredible experience, and you know, I got a chance to go to Dayton and perform in the UD Arena, and I kissed that gross wall, you know, or whatever it may be, right? Oh, and you should have seen me. I got the drum cart all the way back up the, you know, like whatever it may be, right? The answer is that's literally your very best recruiting tool. Your best recruiting tool is your members. If you do what you need to do to help make sure that they have the most incredible experience possible. The fundamental part of that great experience starts with member safety. It starts with understanding that your members have to feel safe in your program. So the people that you choose to have around you teaching with you as a part of your staff, or even volunteers, number one, they need to go through the processes that WGI puts forth, whether it's the safe sport training or what have you. They need to be background checked. But more so, it's a situation where you, as the director, you need to not be in a situation where you're just like, hey, just go do sectionals, and not know what's going on there. And a lot of times we think, well, it's independent, right? So it's not that big a deal, right? And the answer is it's even more of a big deal to us. Schools already have structure in place for all of those things. And so in the scholastic world, the idea of people being background checked and member safety, student safety always being paramount, those things are like a part of the culture of most public schools or private schools. But independent groups sometimes fall flat in that area. All it takes is one situation to happen and for it to be on Reddit, and the next thing you know, your organization's done. Okay, and member safety is kind of like trust, right? Because that's really what it is. It's really trust, right? And my parents taught me when I was a kid, a long time ago, right? They taught me that trust is something that is super hard to gain and super easy to lose. And the bottom line is, all it takes is one kid, that one performer, to have a bad experience, to be, to be verbally abused in a way which is not appropriate, to be held to a standard which is not appropriate, to God forbid have a sexual thing happen or whatever it may be. And the way we are right now, maybe back in the day it just wasn't talked about. There was no way for that kid to get the message out to other people. That was unfortunate, because it's a lot better situation that if someone's doing the wrong thing, that it gets told to the world so that doesn't happen again. All right, and as an organization, it's our job to keep our kids safe. So you as the director or you as the administrator of that organization, it's on you to make sure that you know every single thing going on in your organization from that standpoint. So past member safety, then it becomes more about member experience. If your kids aren't having fun, you're doing it wrong. Like, if they're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. If the show is so hard that they're not able to accomplish it and they're getting yelled at in rehearsal because they're not doing what you're asking of them, you probably wrote it too hard. It's probably too challenging for them. If you have a brand new organization, you jump into world class and you're expecting them to do world class skills, and they're not at that level, and then their experience isn't a positive one because they're not able to accomplish what you're asking of them. It's not really on them, right? It's on you. And so it's our job as directors and administrators to make sure that we put our performers in a situation where their joy of performing and their joy of being a part of an organization can come through in droves, right? You guys have anything to add on that?
No.
Yeah, not a whole lot. I mean, just the goal is really just like make sure that your students are having an incredible time. We always put focus when it comes to member experience on creating and developing better people over better performers. And then kind of piggybacking what you were talking about with staff too, just to make sure that they have a great experience. It's just like your staff and your designers, they have to love the activity. They have to care for your kids more. And that's kind of our philosophy when it comes to bringing anyone through the door, is just we are student first 100% of the time, and that's how we roll. And that's really what has allowed us to experience success, and I'm sure the same for you guys.
Yeah.
That's really, really important. I hope you heard the thing he said in the middle of there, where he said, you should love the activity, and it's really, really important, but you should love caring for members and students first. If you do that, then the activity, it's really interesting, like the activity takes care of itself. Because if the performers are having fun, they're going to go home and practice too. By the way, didn't know if you knew that, but spoiler alert, right? So we want to make sure they're having a great time, okay? So the last part of this is resource management, okay? And so resources come in many different forms. We've actually talked about a bunch of them already. So physical resources is like, you got to have instruments to play. You got to have a place to rehearse. You have to have members to do it, and you have to have publicity opportunities through social media to be able to get the word out about what you're doing. So let's talk about physical resources. How do we handle that in each organization?
At Horizon, it was pretty simple. When we first started Horizon Wins, the only thing we owned was the name. We had nothing. Absolutely nothing. We borrowed a sound system from a high school. We bought a floor for $300 that had already been at Dayton in guard and percussion. Our floor made the rounds after we were done with it. We pulled it out of the tunnel in Dayton in 17 and loaded it right into somebody else's trailer because we'd already sold it before we even left. And that floor was great for us. It was a bit of, we did work on it. It wasn't square. It was all kinds of weird things going on. But you do what you do. And our show was created around it, and it kind of worked out well. Instruments, we don't own any instruments. We borrow all of our low brass and mellophones from local schools.
We do own a drum set and we do own a keyboard.
Yes.
But we don't own any of the wind instruments.
Yeah, over the first 3 or 4 years, the one area that we knew we had to work on was our electronics in that world. And we did incorporate a drum set into our show for the first several years. So we have keyboards, we have keyboard cart, we have synths, we have really nice sound system, boards, wireless mics. We have a really nice electrical setup. We had 10 wireless mics running in our show last year. I mean, we do a lot of stuff, and we've invested a lot into that side for us. That's where we invested our money. So we could do all of that, and we could enhance our show with not just electronics, but with live percussion and guitars and things. And that's just been a choice we made to do, and that's where we invested our money. But when we started, we didn't have any of that. And since then, I mean, that's been our major investment money-wise, is keeping that world going. We rehearse outside. We live in Florida. We can do that. We do invest a little bit in facilities as we need to, as we get close to shows, and that's really our everyone's biggest challenge. Obviously, we do have the bonus of being in Florida, where weather does not cause us an issue most of the time, and it doesn't rain in the wintertime. So we're in a pretty good setup with that. But it does cost us anytime we want to get in the gyms, and that's one of the resources that we do more and more on. And the benefit of a lot of the connections that Steve and I have on the West Coast with a lot of our programs being there is we do have a lot of our programs we write for in the fall that are able to help us out in the winter. And so there's a lot of working with the directors and the programs to help in that end. But physical for us, it was nothing in the beginning. And then what do we have to do to continue to build and add on to make it work for us? That includes uniforms and all of those things. And then you have to get to Dayton. I mean, that's part of the physical resource component, is we have to buy all these things, but we still have to get from Florida to Dayton every year. And that's about half our budget when it comes to travel and everything else. And it's a 13 to 15 hour ride to get from Florida to Ohio. So that's really where a lot of our physical resources outside of the performing side is how do we get to championships at the end of the season.
To be fair, the 13 to 15 hour thing doesn't include the stop at Buc-ee's. So, I mean, just to be honest. So it's more like at least an extra 4 hours, right?
2 days later.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, so us, like I said earlier, like we originally were a drum corps, and we had a handful of instruments that were probably irresponsibly purchased in not that great of shape. So we were in a situation where if you were a brass player and you didn't have your own horn, we had something that could work, but wasn't incredible. For the most part, every single student brings their own instrument. When it came to a sound system, once we finally started using one a few years in, I was a music director at a church in the city that we rehearse in, and I was just really fortunate that there was a sound system that they hadn't been using for years and years and years sitting in the basement. So again, it comes back to just great relationships with everybody that you're around. And that's really where we were. In terms of uniforms, we came out in year one in long sleeve t-shirts. The next year, we decided we were going to take a giant step forward, and we were in track jackets. The year after that, we found somebody that could hand make something. They weren't incredible, but they were still a little bit of a step up. And then we finally eventually started working towards purchasing uniforms from companies on occasion. Even this last year, we purchased them used, and just because of issues created by the pandemic, the company that we needed a few more, and the company that produced them just wasn't able to get them on time, and we had somebody who kind of handmade some that made them look really, really similar for the people that still needed one. You do what you can with the resources that you have. You don't try and seek top dollar anything when it comes to your organization, especially being new, because you want to survive. A lot of us, we see that world-class group this in whatever division is sponsored by this company, that company, and we think, well, we need to do that.
Good luck.
Yeah, it's just not how that works.
Let us know when you figure that one out.
Right. Yeah, you need to work with what you have. Anyone who's a band director, it's a struggle, but we have made an Amazon sound produce a tone on occasion, or Amazon horn produce a sound on occasion, and you do what you got to do.
Well, and I think it's important. We brought up that idea of like a group comes out in world class or comes out in a class that it's really difficult to sustain at first in, and we would say start smaller. We just talked about that a few minutes ago. Start smaller. Don't be afraid to, don't think that you need a $3,000 newly printed floor in order to put your first show on and have members on the floor. It's not necessary. You find a way.
the back of a floor we already had, and duct tape this year.
Hey, we want to go
Yeah.
metal with a duct tape floor. Woohoo!
Like it's you do what you got to do with what you've got.
We had already won 2 medals before we bought a floor. Like
Yep.
our 18 was a base floor from a circuit. The base floor that's down when everybody walks in the gym, we bought that from FFCC a couple years prior. So we had a gigantic black floor that we used for our 18 show, and we cut it down so it would actually fit in the gym because these things were designed to fit in arenas. But we didn't buy a floor outright, custom design until our 3rd year when we finally had the money. We got numbers, and it's a numbers game. That for us was huge.
And I think kind of going back, like, because we were at the digital floor stage, and we're hoping to be there again in the future, but the pandemic kind of like became a thing. So it came down to like, how do we make things work with, after taking an entire year off, and that's a whole world that we can get into. But like, I think it's really important to realize that it might not always be a global pandemic, but there are things that are going to happen along the way that require you to really just take a step back and make sure that, again, you work with what you've got to make sure the kids have a great season. You don't have to go out and get more.
Wayne, that's something that
I don't want to butt in, but
Go ahead.
I've seen a lot of brand new groups that didn't even have a floor.
Yep.
Or they have little patchworks, little clouds and things like that.
Sure, absolutely. There's nothing. The cool thing about WGI Wins, and I mean, I've been on the steering committee. I'm in the 4th year of my 2-year term.
Thanks, pandemic.
Thanks, pandemic, right? So, to be honest with you, like the advisory board and the steering committee, our answer is, we want you to be able to succeed no matter what you choose to put on the floor. There are no prerequisites in our activity. There's nothing saying, Wayne always jokes around like he wants a saxophone choir. Somebody put out a dadgum saxophone choir for Wayne already, right? So we don't, there's nothing saying that you have to have the full complement of instruments. There's nothing saying you have to have a printed floor. There's nothing saying that you have to have props. You bring your creativity to the table, and sometimes the most creative decisions are the ones that don't need all of those resources. So maybe just think through that. You guys have anything else on this? Let's talk really quick about facilities. So rehearsal facilities are the bane of existence of independent groups. And to be honest with you, they're the reason that many independent groups from the WIN standpoint didn't make it through the pandemic. Because a lot of times when the pandemic hit, schools and churches and what have you, they just said, look, the germ pool in our building is already big enough, and we don't need to add outside people adding into the germ pool in the building. And that made a lot of sense, and we understood that. To be honest with you, we have an irrational advantage. It's an irrational climate advantage, right? So the year of the pandemic, I don't think we saw the inside of a gym, other than we actually had an active circuit season, but we didn't see the inside of a gym the entire season for a rehearsal.
Only for videos, to submit videos for WGI, and to the 2 shows we did, which are the only other times, which is fun to be outside all the time, and then suddenly you're in a gym, and suddenly everything's really loud. Yeah, I mean, it was. We were fortunate to have a circuit that still existed and did. We did virtual and in-person shows with a lot of limitations, but we were able to make it happen.
One of our goals as an organization from Horizon is actually to get inside more this year. So we're working on those. We're working on that opportunity so that we can actually make indoor sound choices, except other than on the day of a contest. So what about LSM? What do you guys do?
Yeah, so for us, we start off in a church, the church that I worked at, and again, it's all about relationships. And then at in my school district, we were very fortunate to say like, hey, we have this thing going on. This many kids from our school participate. They're spending this much more time on their instrument. If you've noticed the concert bands are sounding better, this is kind of why. And we were able to start using the gymnasium there. We still have to pay a facility fee, but again, like we work out a relationship, and we try to, whenever we're at any other school too, where we make it a really big point that we want to benefit that school's band program. So we offer to put on clinics. One thing that we always ask, it doesn't always get granted, is that a portion of our facility fee goes back to that school's band program. Because again, we're all about promoting other bands, and when we create those relationships, and especially with those band directors, they're more likely to send their kids to you. During the pandemic, we were completely shut down. We couldn't really do a whole lot. Once we were allowed to start doing some things, we really just kind of got our kids together in a facility that we were allowed to, and just kept making music and kept playing stuff from last year, because again, we wanted to try and promote a member experience. It wasn't anything glorious. We didn't do any of the virtual options, which were wonderful. We just were not able to. But kind of going back to facilities, we're just really fortunate where I'm a band director, my wife is a band director, and we now have those relationships with our schools. Before that time though, neither of us were, when we first started WGI, it was all about just like, what can we do for your program when approaching other schools? If you are less focused on yourself, like yes, of course, we need four walls around us, we need to be able to put a floor down and do whatever we're going to do, but if you look outwardly in how you can give back to the community, it's going to help you just tenfold.
Yeah, anything else on resource management?
Just a quick personnel one, which there's a whole lot involved, but in our end, what has helped us greatly is that, like I said earlier, a lot of our staff are directors and teachers in the area, and that's been a big benefit for us. At Horizon, we don't have visual people and music people, although we do have certain jobs. Like my job is to stage the visual and do all that, but everybody on our staff does both. In fact, almost every person on our staff has written drill and done that at the same time, and we're all band directors. So we kind of come at it from different sides, focus-wise, but we all do all of it, and that's been one of our things. One interesting thing about us, which is when it comes back to financial resources and things, I have yet to make a cent working for Horizon. We don't pay anybody on the staff side, which is a sacrifice at times, because then you'll get people, but they have other options that are available to them. That happens. But we've been very fortunate to maintain a great group of people within our organization that are all local and love doing it. And for me, that shows, I hate not being able to pay people, including myself, but it's great to see that people are willing to come in every year and still do it. Like, to me, that shows them that they're really committed to it. I'm not going to take advantage of that, because we're actually trying to fix that problem as we speak. But you have people who are committed when the money is not a question and it's not an issue anymore. And so for us, that's been our choice. Not by any means is it a choice everybody else should do. But for us, we had to. Like, we had no choice. Do we get uniforms and do we get good music arrangement, or do we pay the staff? And for us, our choice was, let's make the show the best we can for the kids, and then we'll take care of us later.
Well, and we have paid, obviously, contractual workers. Like, we do pay for music and we do pay for electronics design and those kind of things. But neither one of us ever made a penny from Horizon. It's just the way we've structured that organization as a nonprofit at this point. We're hoping that'll change soon.
Yeah.
We're working on that, but even then it'll be, meager amounts, just to make sure that we don't lose money over the time of being associated with it. Yes, sir.
Okay, so as you say, you guys are $1 million. I didn't say that completely, but what is your percentage of your members' dues to go into the organization for it? Is it almost like 90%? Is it 70%?
The budget is nearly 100% dues, which includes some fundraising. Understand that that's a place that we're looking to change. So we're working on grant writing. We're working on corporate sponsorships. The person who was in charge of the program before me, in charge of the Performing Arts Association before me, who's amazing, and by no means do we have criticism of Steve. We think we greatly appreciate everything he did for the organization. We're just trying to move forward and make it more financially sound by including those parts, but they're not in place at this point.
No, I understand. I know, like, with you guys down in Florida, it's a little easier because rehearsal facilities and everything, you don't have to pay as much because you're outside about
Sure.
so much more compared to Northeast, where we're from.
Right.
Where it's like, we're not outside in the snow for a month and a half, 2 months.
Well, you should do a show about the snow then.
Yeah.
And then you could use a natural floor. I'm not sure the UD Arena would like you, maybe bringing it in,
We're
but
gonna have the snow come in as.
I mean,
Our facilities budget, and you'll laugh, in our facilities budget, we kind of look at that and go, no, we don't have to worry about that. Because it's not something we think about when it comes to,
Yeah,
we have a little bit in there because we know for Dayton and a few places we're going to have a little bit, but it's not really something we think about. But we do turn 100% of the money we come in on dues is the season.
Do you also have kids, I'm sorry, you also have kids keep their uniform, like, that's in the budget too, like, different things?
Yes and no.
Yeah, we do some years.
Yeah, some years we've given them to the kids, some years we haven't. Depends on if we feel like it's something that we can actually turn back around and sell. It gets harder when I have all these creative ideas I want to do uniform and floor-wise, and I look at it and go, no one's ever going to buy this. Like, why would somebody buy this floor? It was cool for our show, but how are we going to sell this and make it a marketable thing? So sometimes some of the kids have their uniforms for some years. Some years we still have them. It kind of depends on what it is.
Yeah, because that's all I'm looking, like, budget, like, okay, this is this, and then here's $250 for the shoes and this, inside the budget, but you keep this. So that way they know up front what's going on.
our kids, I think in both organizations, they buy their own shoes. Those kind of things that we know they're going to keep. They buy that in addition to their regular member fee, because the idea would be that if a kid was a part of the organization before, they probably don't need another pair of the same shoes. So, it's a sort of an optional thing that we base our fees upon.
I think for us, just kind of going back to like the whole fundraising side of things, a substantial amount of our budget is achieved through fundraising. I don't have the exact percentages off the top of my head, but I mean, I know it is a lot compared to other independent groups, and it really comes back to, like I was talking about earlier, the relationships that we have. We're very fortunate. We're the vice president of our board of directors. Is also the band booster president at the school that I teach at, and once we got her children involved with our program, she saw the value in what we were doing, and was 100% on board, and is always just bouncing fundraising ideas off of me, and we're trying to figure out, like, the way I kind of talk with our board is, yes, we are providing a service, but it'd be great if this was free, right? Like, and we know that, like, that's never a possibility in here. But when we talk to people on our board about fundraising, my approach is, when it comes to other nonprofits, like, or just nonprofits in general, the people we serve are our students. You're not, and ultimately they're the ones right now that are paying a lot to be here. We don't want to go to the food. We don't want to work for a food bank and tell the people that we're serving to pay us. So, and that kind of like shifted focus on, like, wow, we really need to make sure that we're looking for every opportunity possible to make sure that we are just like bringing money in, whether it's through donations. You guys talked a lot about stuff yesterday in your session. We also do a Quartermania, which is a blast. It's a really unique fundraiser. That's just incredibly hard to explain. We've done things like casino nights, and just we do a ton of fundraising compared to a lot of other groups. So if you ever need a resource for that, feel free. We're gonna have contact info to get in touch with me. I'd love to help you out.
So time's running short, so we want to make sure we get on the last section of our presentation, which is how to sustain success. So I feel like I'm doing a show about general effect, right? We always talk create general effect, sustain general effect. So in this situation, create a great organization and then sustain it over the long period. So 3 major points here is fundraising and fiscal responsibility. We just had a little bit of a conversation about that, but we'll talk more a little bit about strategic planning, and then we're going back to member experience because it's really the most important part of what we're talking about here. So in terms of fiscal responsibility, here's kind of the brunt of the conversation. Look, it's not a Fortune 500 company, but it's still a company. And it's still a business. Even if it's a nonprofit, it's still a business. So thinking about it like a business, meaning budgeting correctly, making sure that you're putting money back for the next season for starting funds, and that you don't run through all of your financial resources in one year. Making sure that you're setting yourself up for long-term financial success is really, really important. The number of groups. Wayne talked yesterday about the fact that independent, or the groups in general that are not around the second year are generally, it's because of director change, right? Probably I would bet that the second reason is because they weren't fiscally responsible. They didn't set themselves up for the long term. They thought about the short term, but not the long term. And so you should have a 1-year plan for sure. Like, we're talking about shows. What are we going to do this year? What's the goal for this year? How do we, what class do we want to be in? Where are we going to, where are we going to get our members for this year? How are we going to? But we're also talking long-term financial planning. Like, how do we make sure that 5 years from now, Horizon Wins is still still a viable organization that's bringing an experience to performers, and it's really, really important. So, other than what we've talked about already for fundraising, what have you, what else do you guys have for fiscal responsibility?
It kind of goes back to the resources for us. It's just being smart about how you use an ad. And as the visual person, I love props. I'll admit it. I tell everybody I love props. I know they drive people crazy. I love them. I love playing with them. I love using them. I love moving them around the floor. But there's always the possibility, like, I'm going to borrow props from one of my bands that I work with for our winter season this year, because we have the ability to do it. And it's using the resources you have in place somewhere. And that's huge. On my end, that makes people like Steve and the people who write the checks and manage that end of it. And I've been fortunate. I'll admit I would prefer to just stay on the floor and do that part of the job. And granted, I know part of my job is to make sure that I'm asking things of Steve, and financially we're doing things together, that I'm not writing checks or designing the show beyond our means. But it still doesn't matter what level you're at. You still utilize the resources you have. Why buy 5 things when I can just borrow from a program down the road? And just being smart about it, and just being smart about what you have, no matter what level you're at, no matter what size success you've had. Just always being smart about your resources, because that's, for us, that has been our biggest challenge, is how do you utilize the resources around you, whether it's people or things or whatever that is.
I think part of it for us, it kind of goes off what you're talking about, is just responsibility when it comes to budgeting. We are very clear, and a lot of this was just learning from our first year experience of being so terribly in the red. Like, you need to start, like, WGI registrations in next week, the week after? It's coming in hot.
Next weekend.
Most of us haven't seen our kids yet. We don't know what our groups are even going to look like. Do we have money to pay that fee? Like, you have to have a nest egg ready for costs that come up, even when you don't have kids in front of you, even when you are not collecting dues, even when it's not an active fundraising season. A lot of people think, like, we're a nonprofit organization. That means that we cannot collect any money or make any money that is profit, which, in a sense, yes, you can't have that money go back to one individual person or anything like that. But you can finish the season very much with a little bit of a nest egg, as long as you're making sure that that egg is going back into your organization. I think that's kind of a misconception, is people think, like, we can't spend, we can't have this money. You have to, because we don't just operate season to season. It is a business that has to survive year in, year out.
Okay, so then let's talk a little bit about the 5-year plan, because we've talked a lot about 1-year planning, right? So how do you look at long-term planning, Zach?
So one thing that we started doing the last few years is our board of directors, we actually have an all-day-long retreat where we meet at a venue, and we kind of discuss just, like, what are our giant dreams? How do we achieve them? Our president's very great at getting us to just think big. And then there are other people on our board that kind of, like, put us in our place and kind of, like, box us in and say, like, this is the reality. So we kind of start really, really big, and we think, okay, how can we achieve this? Sometimes we can't necessarily do that, and then we kind of have to take a step back and say, like, this is what's realistic for our organization. So our 5-year plan has never included, like, anything like, we're going to be in this class by this certain year. We kind of, like, you guys let that kind of happen organically. Like, we think our kids are ready for open class, so we're going to take that step this year. If we learn maybe that's not the choice, maybe we take a step back in the future, you know? Like, it's all about designing for your kids' success. But when it comes, a lot of our 5-year goals are in terms of, like, resources, how long we want to save over time for some things, and yeah.
5-year plans for us is kind of a new thing. We have just in the last week officially established our board, and we're going to have our first official board meeting with all of our individuals in a few weeks. And I'll be honest, we really have never, on my end of it, we've never really had an extended plan like that. We go year to year. We have other things that we have talked about within the ensemble, but very excited that with Steve pushing this through, the board component of what we're able to do now with Horizon Winds and Horizon PAA, that's going to set us up hopefully to the point that we're going to be able to continue to exist and push forward, and down the road, who knows, maybe have other organizations and other ensembles within it, which I'm really excited about, just having been on a lot of this in the very beginning. So Steve's done a great job of getting that started and forcing all of us to think more in that world, which is not admittedly the world that I think about as much. And I'm glad there's somebody like Steve around that can help that process out.
So what else do you have to say about member experience? I talked about a bunch before, so I'll let you guys talk about it.
I stand by, like, my biggest philosophy is just create an environment where your kids are becoming better people. Like, you have the staff, you have kids or you have people on your staff that can make them sound great, can make them move great. Like, they need to appreciate what you're doing. They need to realize that they have grown as a person. Sometimes that's just holding them to a really high level and saying, like, hey, like, we're sweeping the floor tonight because it looks a little dusty and we want to make sure the school lets us back. Like, it's about creating great people that can go out into the world and do great things. And using this activity as a tool to achieve that. That has always ended up just bringing kids back. It's an environment where they feel that they are in a very mature setting, sometimes compared to the rest of their high school bands, where you have some kids who, you know, can be clowns and we all love them. But I think that's one of the gifts of the independent world is, like, you can bring in kids who are just, like, they all have that goal of wanting to play their instrument, wanting to better themselves, and yeah.
But, you know, that's one thing that I love about how, and Zach and I have really only known each other a little while. We haven't, but it's interesting. We have a very similar approach on everything we do, which is great. Our kids, it's all about them and giving them that experience. And I love when I get to go to programs where I see kids or programs that I write for that will have kids that want to be a part of it, and then they go do it, and then they go back and tell their friends, and you start hearing from other people. And it's the experience they deserve to have. And we try to do everything we can to give them that opportunity. And my own daughter was able to be on Horizon the first couple of years. And as a dad, it was awesome to see her just soak that up and love what that was. I have kids now who are starting to teach their old high schools, and so they're going back and now working, and they're all constantly reaching out to me. Hey, how do you teach this? How do you think about that? We've created this whole thing now where it's not just performing on the floor, but they're a family, and they know that, and they love that part of it. And they all come from all these different schools, and they still love what they bring to the table, and that they get to do it with these other people from different programs that they never would have met before. It's just and they love doing it, and then they keep coming back, and they send their friends back. We have another set of siblings coming back this year. A kid has been in the group for a few years. His younger sister is a freshman in high school, and she's following right in with his brother, and she's going to do it. And you have that kind of buy-in from siblings and families who have had a great experience with their older kid and are ready to send their younger kid. Like, for me, that's the best part right there. That's the family buy-in, and both of us are similar. About 70% of our kids are in high school, and will continue to be. But that's, when you have that, you're creating something pretty special, and the kids dig it, and that's how we all love doing it. My winter is insane, but I would not give it up for anything because I love being with those kids. I tell people when they find out what the schedule is, I'm like, I have 20, 30 kids who are willing to give me 16 hours every weekend for 4 straight months. As a teacher, that's the greatest thing on the planet. Like, you have a whole group of kids that are willing to give you a third of their year on a weekend and give up jobs and give up family and give up other things. And that at least tells me, okay, we're heading in the right direction. We're doing really good things for these kids, and it's good for us as it is for them.
We've got about 4 or 5 minutes left. Do we want to do some questions? Yeah. We can throw our contact info up there.
So there is a Facebook group. It's the WGI Wins Directors and Instructors Facebook group, and we obviously welcome you to make sure that you're a member of that. There's lots of information that goes into that. Chris Wing, who's a member of the board of directors and on the steering committee, and also the other members of the steering committee. We're in there quite often helping people with questions. If you have a question, we are always at your service, but the steering committee is always, I speak on behalf of them to let you know that if there's anything you need at any point, we are always here as a resource to you in any way we can. Okay, what other questions do we have? Yes?
How do you deal with members competing with like other time commitments, whether it be wanting to march a drum corps and go to camps during our season or school events?
We've had a fair amount of that. Like, we usually have 5, 6 kids every year doing drum corps. The bonus to being around in this activity for a long time is I have friends in just about every drum corps out there, so I tell them, I'm like, if you're auditioning here, let me know where you're going. I tell them at auditions, if you're auditioning for drum corps, let us know now, only because I want to help in that communication process. And I've been in that activity long enough that I also understand the communication part of it is, if you let them know that you're doing indoor wins, 95% of those people are going to be excited about it because you're playing 15 hours a weekend. They're excited about that. However, there is a balance. And I tell our kids, we will let you go in January for a camp. I will probably not let you go again until after WGI. Like, we have a system in place with our kids, that's how we do it. If it's somebody I can reach out to, I will reach out to drum corps staff and say, hey, you got one of my kids, he's auditioning, he's in my group, can we work something out? And most of the time, they're pretty flexible. There's a few people out there that maybe not as flexible at it, and that's just part of the process. That's how it is. Everybody wants their kids when they can get their kids. I haven't had very many challenges with that. Usually, if I tell them, you just got to be upfront. When you go in November, December, tell them you're doing this. Tell them this is your world. They let the drum kids do it. The guard kids don't even go in the wintertime for that reason. So we balance that. And then when it comes to working things, it's a give and take. There are some kids that, if they haven't planned ahead and something happened and they have to miss something, then they got to miss it. It's part of the game. I can't be so hard that if I don't allow them to go and they lose their job, then I'm not going to see them anyways.
We also put scholastic commitments above
Yes.
wins
That's
commitments,
the big one. Yeah.
without any question. So if they have a
band, you're at school band.
yeah.
And that helps that relationship with the schools. I mean, that's when they know that that's first. And with so many of our kids coming from high school, that is absolute precedent. We tell them that. We're all good with it. That means some days we're short if MPAs happen at their assessment days and we don't have 5 kids. Well, we don't have them.
I wish we had more time for questions. We're going to be here. So if you,
I think we're the last session in here, right?
oh, hey, we're the last session in here. Anybody else have any questions? Yes.
What did your
like storage and transportation resources look like in those early days?
We have a trailer. We have an 18-foot trailer that we pull. I have a truck for that reason. All the guys, myself and Ryan, who really run the day-to-day stuff. We had a storage unit at one point that we would keep floors and things in. Pretty minimal. Yeah, we have a trailer. We keep stuff. One of the trailers. I mean, our trailer sits at Ryan's house or my house. It bounces between the two. And there are times throughout the year where our garage has.
That's, my garage is full.
Yeah, yeah. If you look at Ryan's garage is Horizon of the past. It's like electronic stuff. If we're not using it in the show that year, it's in his garage, or it's sitting in my driveway as well. Yeah, minimal at our end. We don't have those kinds of things.
Someday we'll open Ryan's garage as like the Horizon Museum.
Yep.
Yep. And Wayne?
Another quick one. I think for the scholastic people here, whatever that means, I think 90% or more of what you talked about applies to every scholastic group.
And even percussion and guard. We were kind of running through things last night. We're like, this kind of
When we
applies to
get this
everyone.
up on the website, I'm going to add that to your title.
Oh, okay, great.
And I know all of us are involved in scholastic groups in addition to this, and I do a scholastic group in town that's been around just 1 year less than Horizon. And it's all the same way. Like, we have never bought uniforms in 5 years for that group. We've bought used uniforms and we've created our own. We did a show where about mountain climbing. So yeah, they wore hoodies and beanies and you just make it work. You make resources happen and you pull out old shows. And
Anyone else have another question or want to change the title of our workshop? Anyone else?
please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Please.
Like, we're all available and we want this to continue on as much as possible.